You know, when I turned 70, I realized something needed to change. My name is Joseph, and today at 72, I want to share how I transformed my life in the last 2 years. It all started when I had trouble tying my own shoes, something so simple that I had always done without thinking. It was my wake-up call. That day, sitting on the edge of my bed, breathless just trying to reach my feet, I decided I couldn't continue like this. My daughter Sarah always insisted that I should take better care of myself. But you know how it is, right? We think everything's fine until it's not anymore. That's when I remembered my father, who lived until he was 90, always active, tending to his vegetable garden. He used to say, son, a still body is like a car in the garage. If you don't use it, it rusts. I started slowly, with small changes. The first thing I did was visit Dr. Smith, the doctor who had been following me for years. He did a complete checkup and gave me an honest diagnosis. Joseph, you still have time to reverse many things, but you need to get moving. I started with short walks, just to the corner store. At first, I confess I came back tired, with shaky legs, but each day I increased the distance a little bit. Today I wake up at 6:30 a.m., put on my walking clothes that Sarah gave me as a present, and take my walk in the park near home. It's 40 minutes of pure joy, watching the sunrise, greeting other walkers, and feeling the wind on my face. Diet was another big challenge. I was always the type who loved a hearty stew for lunch and a good slice of pie with afternoon coffee. But the type 2 diabetes I discovered during the checkup forced me to rethink my choices. The nutritionist, Mrs. Thompson, a very patient lady, taught me how to put together a colorful and tasty plate without giving up the pleasure of eating. I learned that I didn't need to cut out everything I liked, but rather adapt. I switched from white bread to whole grain, started eating more fruits. I discovered that mango with oatmeal for breakfast is delicious, and reduced portions. My vegetable garden, which I started as a hobby, now provides me with lettuce, kale, tomatoes, and fresh herbs. Is there anything more satisfying than harvesting what you planted yourself? My sleep, which used to be irregular, I spent sleepless nights watching television, also improved greatly. I created a routine. After the evening news, I take a light walk around the house, drink some chamomile tea that I grow in my garden, and read a few pages of a book. No cell phone in bed, advice from my granddaughter Emily, who, despite being only 15, is sometimes wiser than me. Medical appointments, which I used to avoid, are now part of my routine. I have everything written down in a calendar on the refrigerator door, appointments with the cardiologist, routine exams, vaccines up to date. My blood pressure, which was a concern, is now under control. Doctor Smith even joked during my last visit. Joseph, you're healthier than many young people out there, but you know what the biggest change was? My energy. Today I can play with my grandchildren without getting exhausted, tend to my garden, do small repairs around the house, and I even started dancing again with my wife Betty at the neighborhood senior center dances. Last weekend I took my grandchildren to the park and managed to play ball with them for over half an hour. The independence I've gained is priceless. I drive my car safely, do my grocery shopping, handle my banking. All this because I decided to take that first step, literally when I realized it was getting difficult to tie my shoes. As my daughter Sarah says, "Dad, you have more energy than many young folks out there." And it's true. Today I understand that taking care of your health isn't a burden, but a gift we give to ourselves and the people we love. Every morning I wake up feeling energetic. Every game with the grandchildren, every dance with Betty is a celebration of this new life I chose to live. When I retired from my carpentry business, after 45 years of making custom furniture, I thought my brain would retire too. After all, I no longer needed to make precise measurements or create elaborate projects for clients. But how wrong I was. It was on a Sunday afternoon, doing crossword puzzles with my wife Betty, when she said something that changed my perspective. "Joseph, you complain about being forgetful, but you're still the only one who can solve the hardest words in this newspaper." It was like a light bulb went on in my head. I began to realize that my brain was like the tools in my old workshop. If you don't use them, they rust. I remember clearly the day my granddaughter Emily came home frustrated because I had asked for the 3rd time how to set up WhatsApp on my cell phone. She sat with me at the kitchen table and instead of doing everything for me like the other times, decided to teach me step by step. "Grandpa, let's do it this way. You're going to write down each step in a notebook, like you used to do with furniture measurements, she suggested. That made perfect sense to me. In a week, I was not only sending messages and voice notes, but also learned how to make video calls. What a joy to be able to see the face of my grandson, Ethan, who lives in Chicago. Excited by this progress, I decided to go further. I enrolled in a basic computer course at the community center, specifically for seniors. At first, I confess it was challenging. Using the mouse seemed more difficult than handling an electric saw, but gradually, with the patience of the instructor, Mike, a young man about the age of my son, I got the hang of it. The class turned into a group of friends. Mrs. Johnson, who's 75, taught me how to use YouTube to watch videos on artistic woodworking, something I never imagined existed on the internet. And Mr. Thompson, my 68-year-old classmate, showed me how to search for recipes to help with the diet my doctor recommended. One day, browsing the internet, I found an online chess group. I used to play when I was young, but it had been years since I'd moved a piece. I started playing virtual matches with people from all over the world. Imagine that, me, who never left the United States, playing chess with a gentleman from Russia. Betty jokes that now she has to schedule time to talk to me, but an active brain doesn't live on technology alone. I picked up the reading habit that I had abandoned years ago. I started with books on American history, my old passion. Then, at Sarah's suggestion, I began reading novels. Currently, I'm part of a book club with other retirees in the neighborhood. We meet once a month at the local library to discuss our readings. Diet also became part of my brain care package. The nutritionist explained that certain foods help keep the brain healthy. I increased my fish consumption. Every Wednesday is sardine or tilapia day at our house. Walnuts and almonds became my afternoon snack, along with a cup of green tea. Betty even jokes that I'm turning into a senior intellectual. One of the greatest joys was being able to help my grandson Ethan with his science fair. He needed to do a project on sustainability, and I was able to teach him everything I learned about wood reuse in carpentry. We had several video calls where I explained the different types of wood and their characteristics. His project won first place. Seeing how my knowledge could still be useful filled me with pride. I also started doing crossword puzzles and Sudoku daily. I have a special notebook for this on my bedside table. Betty says I now take longer at breakfast because I won't leave the table without finishing the day's challenge, but I notice how it's been helping me. The other day, I remembered my sister's phone number without having to check my address book. And you know what's most interesting? The more I exercise my mind, the more eager I feel to learn new things. Last week, I started learning Spanish on an app that Emily showed me. I can already say buenos dias and gracias. It's never too late to start, right? The most important thing in all of this is that I feel more confident. The other day I received a suspicious call about a supposed prize I had won. Thanks to our discussions in the computer group about online scams, I quickly identified the fraud attempt. As Mike says, an active mind is the best defense against scammers. Today I understand that keeping your mind sharp isn't just about doing crossword puzzles or learning technology. It's about keeping curiosity alive, being open to new knowledge, and most importantly, not being afraid to learn. As my father used to say, the only age when it's too late to learn is when you decide it's too late. I've always been a simple man, used to working hard in carpentry to support my family. For years, I confess I didn't worry much about financial planning. Money came in, paid the bills, and what was left? Well, there wasn't always anything left. But life has an interesting way of teaching us. It was during a routine medical consultation that I had my financial awakening. Dr. Smith commented about a dental treatment I would need, and the cost scared me. At the time, I didn't have enough savings and had to ask my daughter Sarah for help. That messed with my pride. After a lifetime of being the provider, having to depend financially on my children was a wake-up call. Determined to change this situation, I sought guidance at the bank where I received my retirement checks. The manager, Mrs. Davis, a very helpful lady, sat down with me and did something I had never done: a detailed budget. We took all the statements from the last 3 months and analyzed each expense. It was revealing. I discovered I was spending a small fortune on grocery items that ended up spoiling in the fridge. I started writing everything down in a small notebook, something I learned in carpentry, where every piece of wood needed to be accounted for. We created categories: essential expenses, like medications, food, and fixed bills, variable expenses, like leisure and gifts, and a new category that Mrs. Davis insisted I create, emergency fund. To increase my income, I started doing small carpentry jobs again. Not the big furniture pieces like before, my back doesn't allow it anymore, but small decorative objects and repairs. I started making personalized cutting boards for the neighborhood craft fair. To my surprise, they were so successful that I now have a small waiting list for orders. Betty also joined in the savings dance. She, who was always good with handicrafts, started making preserves and jams with fruits from our backyard. We sell them to neighbors and at the fair, and the money goes straight into our savings account. As she says, every jar sold is a brick in our future. One of the biggest changes was regarding medications. I discovered that some medicines I use have much cheaper generic versions. I also registered for the Medicare prescription drug program, where I can get some medications for free. The monthly savings were considerable. As my father would say, it's not how much you earn, it's how much you save. I learned to negotiate too. When I realized I was paying too much for my cell phone plan, I researched other carriers and got a more economical package. I did the same with health insurance. I switched to one that offered better coverage for the same price. These are small savings that make a big difference at the end of the month. An interesting discovery was the power of financial control apps. My granddaughter Emily taught me to use one that photographs receipts and organizes all expenses automatically. At first I thought it was complicated, but now I can't live without it. It's much more practical than my little notebook, although I still keep both, just in case technology fails, you know? I created the habit of saving all the coins I receive in a piggy bank, the kind you have to break to open. Every end of the year, Betty and I break the piggy bank and use the money for something special. Last year, we saved enough to spend a weekend at the beach, something we hadn't done in years. The grandchildren also joined our School of Economics. When they come to visit, we always talk about the value of money. Ethan, the oldest, already has his own piggy bank inspired by Grandpa's. Emily, in turn, helped me create a spreadsheet on the computer to control the sales of my carpentry pieces. Another important change was creating a fund for unexpected expenses. Every month, I set aside a small amount for emergencies. At first, it wasn't much, but over time I managed to increase it. This reserve has saved me several times, like when I needed to replace the refrigerator in a hurry. What a relief it was not to have to resort to loans or ask the kids for help. I also learned the importance of price research. Before any major purchase, I do a real investigation. I use the internet to compare prices, ask in different stores, and wait for promotions. As Mr. Thompson, my friend from the computer course, says, haste is the enemy of economy. One of the greatest satisfactions was being able to give my grandchildren Christmas presents last year with money I had saved throughout the year, without compromising the budget. Seeing their happy faces is priceless, especially knowing that I achieved this with planning and discipline. Today at 72, I can say that I have more control over my finances than I did at 50. I'm not rich, but I have peace of mind when I go to sleep at night, knowing that I can cover my expenses and still have a reserve for emergencies. As I always tell my grandchildren, money doesn't bring happiness, but having an organized financial life brings a lot of peace. Family has always been the center of my life, but I confess that keeping strong bonds hasn't always been easy. As a father of 3 children and grandfather of 4, I've learned that each generation brings its own challenges and joys. And you know what? The greatest lessons about family I learned after 70. It all started when I realized I was having difficulties connecting with my youngest grandson, Jake, who's 12. Unlike Ethan and Emily, who grew up nearby, Jake lives in New York with my son, Michael. Our communication was limited to quick "Hi, Grandpa" during video calls. That hurt my heart. It was on a Sunday afternoon during our family lunch that I had an enlightening conversation with Sarah, my oldest daughter. "Dad," she said, "you need to understand that the world of young people today is different. There's no use expecting them to fully adapt to our way. We need to find a middle ground." Those words kept ringing in my head. I remembered my own father, who never understood why I preferred to use electric machines in carpentry instead of the hand tools he valued so much. I realized I was running the risk of repeating the same pattern with my grandchildren, so I decided to do something different. With Emily's help, my 15-year-old granddaughter, I created an Instagram account. At first, I felt like a fish out of water. Why so many photos and stories? But gradually, I started to understand the charm of it all. I began by posting photos of my woodworking pieces, then started sharing moments from my daily life. To my surprise, Jake started liking my posts. One day, he commented on a photo of a cutting board I had made. "Cool, Grandpa. How do you make these designs on the wood?" It was our first real conversation in months. Since then, I started making short videos showing my work process in the workshop. Jake not only watches, but shares them with his friends. With Ethan, my 17-year-old grandson, the connection came through online games. I never imagined that one day I'd be playing virtual chess with my own grandson. During the matches, we talk about everything: school, dreams, fears. In one of these conversations, he confessed to me that he was thinking about studying engineering, inspired by our talks about calculations and measurements in carpentry. Betty also joined this journey of family connection. She created a WhatsApp group called Grandma's Recipes, where she shares her culinary secrets with our daughters-in-law and granddaughters. Every Sunday, someone in the family tries one of the recipes and shares the result in the group. Sometimes it turns out well, sometimes not so much, but it always leads to good laughs and conversations. One of the initiatives I'm most proud of was creating Knowledge Sunday. Once a month, each family member teaches something to the others. Emily has already given us a class on cell phone photography. Ethan explained about renewable energy, and even little Jake did a presentation on his favorite dinosaurs. I, of course, taught basic carpentry techniques, but it's not all roses. We had our difficult moments too. When my son Michael decided to move to New York with his family, it was a shock. In the first few weeks, I could barely talk to him without getting emotional. It was Betty who helped me see the positive side. "Joseph, now we have a reason to learn how to use technology better, and we even gained a place to spend vacations." I also learned the importance of respecting different ways of raising children. When Sarah decided that my granddaughter Emily could dye her hair purple, I confess I almost had a fit. But I held back, took a deep breath and thought, if this isn't hurting anyone, why oppose it? Today I laugh remembering how scandalized I was by something so simple. One of the most valuable lessons I learned was about apologizing. The other day, during a discussion about politics with my son David, I lost my patience and said things I regretted. Instead of letting that create a chasm between us, I swallowed my pride and apologized. To my surprise, this not only resolved the conflict, but brought us even closer. We also created new traditions. Every last Saturday of the month is homemade pizza day at our house. Everyone brings an ingredient and we make the pizzas together. It's a mess. Flour everywhere, discussions about which is the best topping, kids running around the kitchen. But it's in these moments that we build our most precious memories. With the pandemic, we had to reinvent ourselves. In-person gatherings were replaced by video calls, but we kept the spirit of unity. We had virtual birthdays, played online bingo, and even organized a family talent show on Zoom. It wasn't the same as being physically together, but we learned that love always finds a way. Today, at 72, I understand that maintaining strong family ties is like tending to a plant. It needs daily attention, patience, and sometimes a pruning here and there. But the most important thing is love, that feeling that makes us overcome differences and find joy in the little things. As I always say to my grandchildren, family is like a piece of fine wood. It may have its knots and imperfections, but that's what makes it unique and special. When I talk about companionship, I can't help but think of Betty, my partner for 47 years. Our story isn't one of those movie stories, with grand romantic gestures or extraordinary events. It's a story made of small moments, built day by day, like a well-made piece of furniture that stands the test of time. I met Betty at a church picnic in 1975. I had just opened my carpentry shop and she was working at the neighborhood pharmacy. What started with a clumsy square dance, I confess I've always had two left feet, turned into a lifetime of partnership. But it was after we retired that we discovered a new dimension to our relationship. I remember well the day I realized this. It was when I had to have cataract surgery. I was nervous, more from the fear of the unknown than the surgery itself. Betty not only accompanied me to all the consultations, but she memorized all the medical recommendations. To this day, she knows more about cataracts than I do. During the recovery, she read to me every night, since I couldn't strain my eyes. The interesting thing is how we've developed a kind of code of our own over the years. Betty knows when I'm worried just by the way I fidget with my mustache. I know when she's anxious by the way she arranges and rearranges the sofa cushions. We no longer need long explanations, a look, a gesture, and we understand everything. Our routine might seem monotonous to some, but for us it's full of meaning. Every morning after my walk in the park, we have coffee together on the porch. She has her whole wheat bread with homemade jam. I have my fruits because of diabetes. We talk about everything and nothing, from the news in the paper to the dreams we had during the night. We've also learned to respect each other's space. Betty has her craft group on Tuesdays. I have my woodworking shop. When we reunite at the end of the day, we have new stories to share. As she always says, a good relationship is like a dance. Sometimes you need to take a step back to move forward. The challenges of age brought a new dimension to our companionship. When I discovered I had diabetes, Betty not only completely changed our menu, but started taking walks with me. "If you can't eat sugar, I don't need it either," she said. And so we kept adapting together to each new limitation that arose. We had our difficult moments, of course. Last year was particularly challenging when Betty had a fall and fractured her wrist. For 2 months, I was her hands for many tasks. I learned to do things I had never done before, from ironing clothes, not always perfectly, to preparing that herbal tea she likes so much. It was a period of mutual learning and patience. One of the most beautiful things we've built together is our garden. It started as a small project, just a few herbs for seasoning, but it grew along with our free time. Today we have tomatoes, lettuce, kale, carrots, and a variety of medicinal herbs. Each plant has a story. Each harvest is a shared celebration. On Saturdays we have our special ritual. After lunch we put on some old music, usually Frank Sinatra or Nat King Cole, and dance in the living room, even if it's just a slow shuffle. Our grandchildren think it's funny, but for us, it's a way of keeping alive that first dance from the church picnic. We also discovered new hobbies together. Betty always wanted to learn photography, so we signed up for a basic course at the community center. Now she photographs my woodworking pieces for Instagram, and I've learned to be a very patient model for her photographic experiments in the garden. Last year, when we completed 47 years of marriage, our children organized a surprise party. The most emotional part was seeing old photos projected on the wall. We were so young, so full of dreams. Betty held my hand and whispered, "We've accomplished more than we dreamed, haven't we?" And she was right. I've learned that companionship in the later years has a special flavor. It's no longer that burning passion of youth, but something deeper, more serene. It's knowing that even in silence, we're never alone. It's having someone who knows your story as well as you do yourself. One of the things I value most is our ability to laugh together. We laugh at our forgetfulness, our clumsy attempts with technology, the little confusions of everyday life. Like the day we went out to do shopping and came back without anything on the list, but with an orchid plant because it was on sale. In difficult moments, when we miss those who have passed away, or when the aches of age become more present, it's companionship that keeps us strong. Betty has a saying that sums it up well. Life is like a patchwork quilt. Some pieces are prettier than others, but it's the whole that keeps us warm. Our routine also includes taking care of each other. Betty reminds me of my medication schedules. I check if she's drinking enough water. She always forgets about that. We share concerns about the children, joys with the grandchildren, plans for the future, even if that future is just until next weekend. As I always tell our grandchildren when they ask about the secret to a lasting marriage, it's not about never arguing or never having problems. It's about choosing every day to face whatever comes together. Learning never stops. That's one of the biggest truths I've discovered. At 72, each day is a new opportunity to learn something different. I remember when I started taking painting classes at the community center, me, who only knew how to work with wood, discovered a whole new world in canvases and paints. At first, my paintings looked like meaningless scribbles, but the teacher, Ms. Anderson, a young artist full of patience, taught me that art isn't about perfection, but expression. I started by painting simple landscapes, inspired by the view from my window. Today, I even dare to do portraits of my grandchildren, even if they sometimes turn out a bit disproportionate. The love is there in every brushstroke. Technology continues to be a daily challenge, and a constant source of learning. Last week, Emily taught me how to use Spotify. Now I have a playlist with just 60s music, which I play in the workshop while I work. It's amazing how I can find those old songs that I thought I'd never hear again. As for hobbies besides carpentry and painting, I discovered photography. I started by photographing my woodwork pieces to sell online, but soon found myself capturing the sunrise during my walks, the birds that visit our garden, the spontaneous smiles of my grandchildren. Each photo tells a story, preserves a moment that will never come back. The garden, which started as a pastime, became real therapy. There's something magical about putting a seed in the ground and watching it grow. I share this passion with Jake, my youngest grandson, who always runs to see what's sprouting whenever he visits us. He even created a planting diary on the computer to help me record what we plant each season. But of all the lessons I've learned over these years, perhaps the most important is about keeping an open heart. Life has taught me that holding grudges is like carrying a bag of sawdust on your back. It only weighs you down and serves no purpose. I learned to forgive, especially myself, for the mistakes and choices of the past. Today, when I look back, I see how much I've grown since that day when I couldn't tie my shoes. Each challenge overcome, each new skill learned, each moment shared with family has made me stronger, wiser, and most importantly, more grateful. I keep a diary, another hobby I discovered late in life, where I record my daily reflections. In the last entry, I wrote something that sums up my journey well. Life is like a piece of raw wood. It needs to be worked with patience, care, and love to reveal its true beauty. Every scratch, every knot, every imperfection tells a story. And just like in carpentry, there's no mistake that can't be fixed. No day that doesn't bring a new opportunity to learn, to love, to live. At 72, I can say I'm living the best days of my life. Not because they're days without challenges or difficulties, but because I've learned to find joy in the little things. In Betty's smile when she wakes up, in the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, in the grandchildren's hugs, in the sound of the saw cutting wood, in the colors of my imperfect paintings. As I always tell my grandchildren, life is like a work of art in constant creation. Each day we add a new color, a new shape, a new meaning. The important thing isn't perfection, but the beauty of continuing to create, learn, and love. And so I end my story, not with a period, but with an ellipsis. Because tomorrow is a new day with new stories to live and tell.